The best thing to do right now is to not look at them, not keep the car locked, keep the windows up, pay them zero attention. You have to de-escalate. Don't give them one word, don't give them a look, don't anything. Hands on the wheel, head down, don't even look at them. It's the best way to de-escalate, right? When he's got a tire on, this is the time to grab a weapon, right? The next thing is this deadly force? And I think the answer is yes, right? But truly, he's still not inside my car. So, look, he broke my window, and now, you're gonna have to surrender to the police officers until they can figure out what happens. And then from there is, you know, if this wasn't justified, you just murdered somebody. And most guys never think that part through. So the best case scenario, especially with your family, is to get away.
Welcome back, everybody. As many of you guys know, I'm a law enforcement trainer instructor. I train and instruct military and law enforcement all over the country on various law enforcement disciplines to include constitutional law, case law, patrol tactics, use of force, advanced criminal investigations, etc. And here I kind of want to, elaborate more on John Shrek McAfee's take here on use of force and road rage incidences. And I know right now the Sheriff of Baghdad's kind of going through a whole that bro thing. You know, some people really like him, some people really don't like him. That's beyond me. You know, I don't get into that bro drama. But what I do like about this, and regardless of what he may have retired as, regardless of what allegations are out there, I don't know. Again, that's not for me to decide or have an opinion on. What we do know is that he has operated as a Delta Force operator, which is, according to Delta Force, ask them yourself, a Tier 1 premier unit, right? It's a Tier 1 unit. DevGru, SEAL Team 6, Tier 1 unit. So based upon all metrics, if you are able to attain and be a part of that team for any amount of time, you are a tier all of your own. And that goes without saying. And so all the people that I know that are very skilled in violence, all the people that I know that, like Jack Crowley, who have, a Purple Heart and Bronze Star with Valor, people that have done and been in combat, people who have had to use force in critical incidences, everybody that I talk to and everybody that I'm familiar with has the same viewpoints that I do. And we all have the same viewpoint, and that is it's better to not get involved in a gunfight if you don't have to. It's better to not get involved in a fight if you don't have to. And so this is kind of a recurring theme. And one of the things I really do like that, Mr. McAfee highlighted here is he actually brought up the journey piece, right? The piece that a lot of people don't want to talk about and don't talk about in training, the adjudication process. Like, you can go use force and you can think you're justified. Cool. You use deadly force. You think you're justified. How do you articulate it? Because if you can't, you're depending on a lawyer to do it for you. And if they can't do it appropriately, you're going to spend your rest of your life in jail, or you're going to spend a considerable amount of time in jail for a felony. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to. And that's not taught enough. And so shameless plug here. One of my favorite courses that I teach is a firearm course for all law enforcement and for concealed carry permit holders. And what I like about the course that I teach and what makes my course different than any other course out there that I've been to is we actually talk about the implications of this, right? You're not getting this course through the eyes of a NRA pistol instructor, or through the eyes of a law enforcement firearms instructor, or through the lens of a military veteran, or from the lens of a patrol officer, SWAT officer, right? I could teach it through those lenses, but I don't. I teach it through the lens of a criminal investigator, as a major crimes task force officer, as somebody who has done who teaches the advanced criminal investigative course for my state, as somebody that has done officer involved shooting investigations in general, use of force instructor. Like, we're going to look at it from this lens and perspective, because if you're going to the class, I'm hoping that you are already know how to operate your weapon system, and I hope that you can use it with a degree of lethality, and you're accurate with it, right? Because that's just one piece. Kind of like what the Sheriff of Baghdad was talking about, there's a whole nother piece of, being able to articulate this was a good use of force on your end. And so I just want to go over some case laws that come straight from my course that most people don't know. Most law enforcement officers and most concealed carry permit holders have never heard of this case law, don't even know this case law exists. And to me, that's frightening. It's beyond frightening. So the first thing that I want to take a look at, and I hope most people are familiar with this. This is as elementary as it gets. I mean, when I mean elementary, we're not even scratching the surface. We're just talking about the surface before we even get to it. And that's going to be the use of force continuum, also known as the use of force triangle. In order to use deadly force, you have to be able to make qualifiers for these three things, right? Intent, means, and opportunity. Again, you have to have intent, means, and opportunity before we even start to even engage in the possibilities of deadly use of force. And using a knife, using a firearm, that is deadly use of force. And so, again, we're just looking at the surface at this point. So keep this in mind, and also keep in mind that use of force is something that you can't just do. Really, you can't just do a 12-hour course and have everything you need. For example, the FLETC use of force instructor course, I believe, is 18 plus days. It might be being longer now. It might be over 20 days, but it's multiple weeks of testing, training, academic test. Like, it is not a give me course. And so, this is something that we can dive into for a very long time. And so why it matters, right? These are things that we have to keep in mind, again, that a lot of people have never even heard of, right? Popov, City versus Margate, 1979. Basically, the court found the department's training was considered reckless, negligent, because there was no event reviews, movies, scenario-based simulation training, or low-light training in residential areas. And so, since they did not incorporate these trainings into their law enforcement regiment, they were considered to be reckless and negligent. Now, the first thing people always say is, well, you're talking about police officers. Cool, that's fine. If you think for a second that a training case law metric is not going to be used against a concealed carry permit holder or anybody that has that uses deadly force with the firearm, it's because you actually haven't sat through a disposition. Just being honest with you. You obviously have not sat through a disposition, and I really hope that before you pick up anything to defend yourself, that you get a lawyer on retainer, and better yet, get some training. So there's one. Here's another one to look at. Zuckel versus City of Denver, 1993. The following disturbance between several people. Zuckel, basically it was reported Zuckel was armed with a knife in a 1985 encounter. A bunch of people told him, hey, officer, Zuckel has a knife. Zuckel turned and faced them, and he only had nail clippers in his hand, not a knife. He was shot and killed. The jury obviously found that the department's deadly force training was only a movie and a lecture, right? And so therefore they found the training was inadequate, and the jury found favor and sided with the Zuckel family. And so again, this is important because again, it shows that you are going to be expected to show receipts for your training. And if your training doesn't exist, that's going to be a big problem. If your training doesn't exist, it's going to be really hard to say that it wasn't negligent, right? There's a really good possibility. Like, what are they going to say? You have zero training, right? Or you have zero training that you're able to present. That's a real deal. That's a real deal to look at and try to articulate there. Here's another one: Oklahoma versus Tuttle, 1985. This is the Supreme Court now. We're talking about the United States Supreme Court affirmed that for law enforcement, firearms training need to be valid and must incorporate the following. Again, must incorporate the following: stress, decision-making, attitude, knowledge, skill, shoot, don't shoot, moving targets, officer required to move on the shooting on the move, low light or adverse lighting shooting, and in-service training, shotgun training. This is Oklahoma City versus Tuttle, 1985. And so, again, this is what the Supreme Court has said. Again, and this is important because without this, a city or a police department or an officer can be found grossly negligent and operating deliberately indifferent. A lot of people don't know this. And again, if you think these arguments, these training arguments, won't be used against you as a everyday citizen. It's because you haven't looked at it, you haven't watched actual courtroom dispositions, you actually haven't watched and studied the literature on use of force. That's all that means. Here's another one out of the 10th Circuit. The 10th Circuit affirmed that insufficient funding does not excuse poor, inadequate training. Again, straight from 10th Circuit, McClellan versus Facteo, 1979. So again, I bring this to your attention not because I'm trying to dissuade you from using force to protect you and your family, protect you from serious bodily harm. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of things you should know, and remember, training is a part of that, right? Again, the Supreme Court has made it very clear on what lack of training can, be demonstrative of gross negligence and indifference. And again, if you believe, and I said it a bunch, I'm going to say it again, if you believe these same arguments aren't used against concealed carry permit holders and everyday citizens, it's because you just don't read the literature. So there you have it. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And most importantly, tell me what you think about this. Do you think training matters or does it not matter? Are you guys going to seek training, or do you guys think that you're fine? Curious to know what you guys have to say in the comment section below. As always, guys, long live the Republic.